Victory Monday here on the Flight Plan podcast. We have not said that enough this season. The Jets get their fourth win of the year down against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They win at 32-25. They checked off a lot of boxes that they hadn't checked this season. Winning a game late in the fourth quarter when they were within a touchdown, getting a defensive stop at the end of the game to clinch a victory. All these things. And of course, this is the 4 down episode of the Flight Plan podcast. So we're going to break it down into 4 key things, and we'll start with the offense. But Zach, overall, happy flight for you too. An early one this morning to get back from Jacksonville, but always nicer after a win.
Yeah. I mean, it's such like an interesting feeling because it doesn't seem like the fans are like especially excited about this one. I think because they've already been eliminated from the playoffs. As we were talking off pod before, like they normally this time of the year, you kind of are talking about like job security if you're a team that is not making the playoffs. But the Jets already fired everybody. And like, we don't know if Aaron Rodgers wants to come back next year. Like nothing's going to be decided. A lot of these guys that are playing well are not even going to be on this team. I mean, not a lot, but Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, who knows? We'll get into Davante in a little bit, but it's a weird feeling, but you know, a win's a win. I wouldn't call it like an amazing win. Like they definitely like had a fight for it for a team led by Mac Jones with the worst defense in the NFL. But there was certainly some good things, some things that have been trends that have been trending in the right direction. Some other things that have not been so good, but you know, they have 4 wins. These next 3 games are all a lot harder. The Dolphins might not actually be good. They're better than the Jets ultimately, but they might not be good. That's the one game and
they have nothing to play for either.
They have nothing to play for. So that last game is going to be pretty terrible. Thankfully it's at home. First time they've had a home game to end the season since like 2016, which for a reporter selfishly is amazing because I don't have to rush back for baggy day. But anyway,
I think they win that one too, just because the Dolphins in the cold. Yeah, nothing to play for away from home.
Unless either team won, unless the Jets decide to tank that game, but I don't think they will, especially if Rodgers is playing. But anyway, Rams and Bills coming up. Those are really good teams. They are better than the Jaguars. Let's see what happens. But anyway, you know, there's some positive things to take out of this game, some negative things. It just feels like a nothing burger generally, though, unfortunately. For our sake, pretty unexciting outside of some cool things that happened. Some funny things that were said in the locker room, but you know, it's just kind of like we're just kind of like, you know, slowly inching toward the finish line. Whereas I think the disaster with the Giants is way more entertaining right now. The Jets got all their stuff out of the way.
Can we get a plane over MetLife next week?
Like what? I mean, I guess the only thing that you would really say on it would be sell the team, but I don't know if that even bothers Woody at this point. So,
I guess that's the difference, right?
Jets fans can get creative. Jets fans can get creative, though, so I shouldn't put it past them. But yeah, Giants fans, you know, this is gone.
I don't think they hate ownership. That's right, because that ownership has actually delivered.
I wouldn't say they love ownership, but they don't hate it in the way that they do with like they definitely get some sell the team stuff. I think Mara's made a lot. John Mara he's more liable to like let his coaches and stuff do what they want, but he also has just made some bad hires. Like, I think he's been influenced by certain people and hasn't done an amazing job, you know, building an infrastructure. And, you know, you just look at these coaching hires like Dable, you can defend, I think. The other ones, Pat Shurmur, you sit in a room with Pat Shurmur, he's the most boring guy. Like, he'd put you to sleep. Like, you want him to stand in front of the team. And he was unsuccessful as a coach. I guess Ben McAdoo, He was good that first year. I mean, maybe you give him another year, I guess. But even that one was, I don't know. Joe Judge came out of nowhere, disaster, and Dable's become a disaster. But like,
he was the hot hire, though.
He was the hot hire, but at the same time, I think if you dug into his past a little more, you would have found that. I think people along the way have not always been huge fans of him, and his demeanor has always been there and all that stuff. And outside of Josh Allen, Josh Allen built him up. They had that good 20. Anyway, we're talking a lot about the Giants, but because they're like I said, they're a more interesting disaster right now. The Jets are kind of just coasting along. Their quarterback isn't hurt. Their offensive line's good. Like it's very weird. It's like hard to pinpoint like what it is about this team, but it's just like apathy. It just seems like all around, both internally and externally, and everybody's just kind of waiting for the offseason. I think all the noise about fans wanting to hire Mike Vrabel, it seems to be getting louder and louder. we're going to get into some coaching stuff later, but we can say this off the top because it was news yesterday, the day before. They are starting their interview process for
Yes.
a couple of guys that aren't employed. John Robinson, Louis Riddick. I personally wouldn't go near John Robinson. I don't think his drafts were very good. He traded AJ Brown for Traylon Burks basically, and I just think generally
he did draft AJ Brown, but
yeah, true, which you get credit for, I guess. Drafted Isaiah Wilson, drafted Caleb Farley in the first round, like some bad ones. I think, and there's probably a reason why he hasn't latched on anywhere yet. Louis Riddick is interesting. He's smart. I think he knows what he's talking about, but he also hasn't worked in a front office in a while. So, and pulling somebody off TV, I don't know how often that actually works. I mean, Mike Mayock, it didn't really work very well. So I don't know. It's those are just guys that are available. They're doing their due diligence, which is smart. I'm sure there'll be other guys that are unemployed that'll get some interviews, like Thomas Dimitroff. I don't even know who are some of the other obvious. I mean, Donna Ponte's not technically on an NFL team. People like that, maybe we'll get some early ones, but the GM they're going to hire is probably in another organization, if I had to guess.
Louis Riddick has been on TV long enough that I actually forgot that he was a front office guy. I just thought of him as like a former player and not like a front office guy. That was interesting.
He's got a lot of interviews.
He would be good for. He would be great for the PR. You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah. He can talk. He comes. Smart. You know, he would be really good in a press conference. I don't know if he would give you anything, but he would sound really good not giving you anything, which is, as a team, exactly what you want, right? That's what you're going
and for. It's not like Joe Douglas was saying very much at his press conferences.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah,
all right,
my prediction would be neither of those two get the job. But yeah, let's go forward.
Yeah. All right, let's go 4 downs. Obvious place to start. Davante Adams had a Davante Adams game, 9 catches, 198 yards, 2 touchdowns, a huge fourth quarter. Clearly had like whatever the connection is with him and Aaron Rodgers. The connection was alive and well on some of those plays. And it was just really cool to see. And it makes you think, right? Well, it'd be great to have this guy back, but I don't know if that's possible.
I know it's complicated because I don't think there's probably almost any chance that he comes back without Aaron. I think he's pretty tied to him when it comes to the Jets. I do think it would be interesting, whoever their coach they hire, like how much that could factor in, or if they, I don't know. I mean, he's not going to make $38 million next year like he's supposed to, but you throw him some money, try and convince him to stay, because I think he is a piece. He is a leader on this team. Even with his ties to Aaron, I think he's pretty highly respected in there. More than in the beginning, I do think it was a little quick for him to make that speech that he did, but I think since then he's kind of backed it up with his play and stuff like that. So, but yeah, this was truly like, it was a very Jetsy and 198 yards that he got, I would say, just because like a weird game that you haven't really seen before. 0 yards in the first half. He had a really bad drop where Rodgers hit him in the hands and he like bobbled it, hit him in the chest, fell. Didn't have a catch at halftime. Comes out. He had a like 40-something yard catch in the third quarter. And then he went off in the fourth. I think he had 125 yards in the last 4 minutes, which is like a record, or most in the last 25 years or something like that. There was a 71-yarder that he basically got behind like 2 defensive backs. Rodgers threw it down the field, hit him, scored a touchdown. There was the play where he got his 100th touchdown, which that was the third quarter, I believe, where he gets them into range. Davante, he barrels over a defender and it looks like he gets a touchdown, but they say he was short. And then Aaron committed like what he has called like a quarterbacking sin, which is like he predetermined that he was going to go back to Davante, but like it was one of those
things.
He's
done a lot this year.
Yeah,
for
I know.
Sin,
I know. That's why I know. So he's committed the sin a lot, but especially with Davante, I would say. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those situations where Davante didn't get it, even though he deserved it, and everybody kind of knew it was going to go to him, and the Jaguars still one-on-one'd him. Like, I don't know why you're going one-on-one. The decisions the Jaguars are making defensively just made no sense. He was wide open a lot of the time. But yeah, it was a fade immediately. Great catch. And, he had another great catch at the sideline where he kind of caught it near his helmet, kept his feet in. Just like a all-around like vintage Davante performance, and showed just like at his best what he can do. He's been really good lately. This was his best game. I think there's been a misconception that he hasn't been good. I don't think that's true. I think the last few games he's been really good. I think there was a stretch where him and Aaron were not on the same page, either route running or hands or whatever it was. But if he's not top 10, he's top 20, I think, and aligned with Garrett Wilson, who is, if not top 10, is top 15 at least right now. Like, that's a very good pairing. Garrett was kind of quiet outside of the first series, but yeah, just huge Devontae performance. Cool for him to get the 100th touchdown. I think he's like 10th all time, because Mike Evans also got a couple touchdowns, I think. So I think he's 10th all time in touchdowns, which I honestly didn't realize that Devontae was that high up on the list. Most of them with Aaron Rodgers, I think something like 70 something. But
that's a weird list because the top 10 is probably all guys that have played.
I know, yeah, because years. Plus like Jerry Rice and stuff like that.
And Jerry Rice, yeah. It's Steve Largent, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I think it is fair to a degree. Like, in retrospect, it's going to be fair if and when Devontae leaves to criticize the trade because you gave up more than you probably had to, considering the wide receiver market. I think Woody kind of really. I mean, I know Joe Douglas probably wanted Devontae, but I think Woody forced it through to a degree that made it so the Jets gave up a 3rd round pick. When I don't think that was what the market was showing with wide receivers, but in terms of like just the player, like it was a winning move in the terms of you brought in a very good player. And again, it's not ideal. You're going to lose your 3rd round pick next year coming off like a 4 or 5 win season, which isn't great, but for what this team is right now, they're still trying to win. He's a winning player, I think, ultimately. I mean, I know he has his issues when things aren't going well and he doesn't have a good quarterback, but when he's on a team that has a good quarterback, I think he's one of the best receivers in the NFL.
This is crazy to even think, but does it bring back the conversation of like getting a young quarterback in and letting Rodgers returns to, like, for that gap year, and it allows you to keep Devontae Adams? Seems crazy after the last few weeks.
I did see somebody tweet like the idea of bringing Aaron back because of Devontae as opposed to like,
yeah, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I still don't think, like, gun to my head, I still don't think Aaron comes back ultimately, but
right.
I really do wonder who the coach is and if that coach wants him, because ultimately, like, if Aaron can play like this when he's healthy, like ultimately he's going to be a year older, more liable to get hurt, probably slower. Like, he's going to get worse as he gets older ultimately, but if he can be an okay quarterback, you get the defense back on track, you fill in some holes. If Mike Vrabel, hypothetically, best case scenario, is the coach, would Vrabel want to coach Aaron Rodgers instead of, mediocre quarterbacks, which for most of the time,
1 year, right? The idea would be for 1 year.
Yeah. Like in Tennessee, he had mediocre quarterbacks most of the time, and he had to overcome that essentially.
Yeah.
And so does he want to do that again, or does he want to just have a quarterback that he believes in? But I don't know. There's a lot of like what ifs, and it's so early. Still a lot to happen. I think if Aaron plays like this the last 3 games, I have to imagine it would tempt Woody to keep him. There is a financial factor where if they keep him, there's like an option bonus that triggers in 26. So, like I said, there's a lot of things happening here. I think a lot of it depends on the coach, but I'm not ready to rule out Rodgers coming back. And so in that case, I'm not ready to rule out Devontae coming back. I just lean towards Aaron not coming back, which means I lean towards, Devontae not coming back.
All right, 2nd down. Offensive line it's been a consistent thing we've talked about here over the last month maybe, but it continues to just look good and got plenty of praise yesterday after the game. Aaron Rodgers calling it out. And you could see probably his confidence in the offensive line in the fact that he held onto the ball. Well, we've talked about him holding onto the ball too long, but he held onto the ball in the right moments. And the 71-yard touchdown is probably the best example that he talked about, where he was able to, look it off and still have time to come back to Adams for that score. The offensive line, 1 sack allowed, and they really shined in this one.
They did. I think in total, I believe they gave up like 6 pressures as an offensive line. I don't even know if they gave up the sack technically or not. At least they weren't credited for it. But I might write something about this, if not this week, pretty soon. But if you want to point to something that's like the most encouraging thing about, or the most appealing part about this job for a prospective coach or offensive coordinator, it's that you have a pretty good offensive line on day one. Like, you don't really have to, you have to develop these guys and get some backups. They need a right tackle. we've talked about this a bunch, so it's a repeat. I'm not the first one to say it, but I'd bring back Morgan Moses and draft somebody to develop, whether that's in the second round or third round or something behind Morgan, who I think is just he's like an old school football player who plays through injuries and is just tough and a leader. And I think he likes being here. So I'd bring him back. But anyway, yeah, this is a solid group. Olu looked really, really good in pass protection. I think he's gotten better as a run blocker. I think AVT's caught his stride quietly. Simpson, we've talked about him a bunch. I think Tittman's been solid. I think there was some questions about Tittman in training camp because all the snap issues, and they really haven't seen those since the very beginning of the season. So, yeah, just, this team could not get any continuity on the O-line for 2022 and 2023. It was just constant injuries, relying on old dudes like Dwayne Brown. I think pretty clearly the mistake Joe Douglas made this whole time was banking on these older guys. I mean, you just had to find the right young guys. I know it's easier said than done, but this is his best O-line of his 6 years as GM, and he's not here for it anymore. And 4 out of the 5 are for sure coming back. They're all under 30. And I just think it legitimately, you could argue, is the biggest positive or appeal for a prospective coach. I think there's other aspects, some of the talent on defense, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, stuff like that. But I think the O-line, it's weird to say because the Jets have been trying to find an even okay O-line forever. But like it's the unit that I think they should be the most proud of. Like it's been so good. There hasn't been like a weak link necessary other than Tyron Smith. Like it almost feels like he wasn't a part of this team all of a sudden. And I mean, ultimately, it probably worked out for the best for Olu that he wasn't thrown into the fire. He played some other positions, which wasn't ideal, but learned from Tyron for half the season, whatever it was. He comes in now. He's looking really good. I think a lot of the noise about Brock Bowers, who looks like maybe the best tight end in the NFL, but I think the noise has calmed down a little bit because if you have your left tackle for the next 10 years, that's way more valuable, especially for a team that just hasn't had that. So I feel really, really good about this O-line. Rodgers clearly does. He was holding on to the ball a lot longer. Is why he was able to throw the ball downfield more. I think there's a few times. I think this was his highest time to throw average. It was over 3 seconds of the entire season, like by far. And he was only pressured 6 times. So that tells you that the O-line was holding their blocks long, and Rodgers able to take his time and make plays. And I think Rodgers earlier in the season used the excuse that the O-line needs to hold their blocks longer. That's why I'm not throwing it downfield. Well, he got his wish, and it worked out. I think he threw 8 passes of over 20 yards in the air, completed 3 of them, including some really good ones to Devontae. And this is the best version of this offense, and that when the O-line is playing this well. And the continuity, at the end of the day, like the Jets try to downplay it often, especially in training camp when this group hasn't practiced much together. Having a group together, we're entering week 16. Having the same starting offensive line for this long of the season is like very, very important and rare these days because guys are just constantly getting hurt. So, props to Joe Douglas for finally building the O-line right in time to get fired.
How it goes. Third down, defensive side of the football. 2 interceptions, Zach. They doubled their interception total for the season. Jalen Mills getting one in the first quarter, and then Sauce getting the game icer really in the fourth quarter. You can point to a lot of things here. Mac Jones probably being number one. The first one I thought was interesting because like when you look at the replay, Sauce lets the receiver by, right? And clearly knows what's behind him because he gets, the receiver has a step on him. And Jalen Mills was there where he was supposed to be for that interception. It wasn't a great throw by Mac Jones, obviously overthrowing the receiver. And then same thing, it was a bad throw in the fourth quarter that Sauce. But the guys made the play to come up with those turnovers that they haven't all year in the secondary.
Yeah. I mean, the Sauce one was the game ender too. And yeah, this team just hasn't forced turnovers. They were without Brandon Echols and DJ Reed, Quantez Stiggers, and I believe Kendall Sheffield. I can't remember if that's the right name, honestly. I should know it. He's a guy that they just called up from the practice squad. But those were the guys that kind of split the reps opposite Sauce. Didn't notice Stiggers that much, although Brian Thomas was burning a lot. He was burning the nickels. He was burning Isaiah Oliver. He did not get anything on Sauce. Sauce only allowed 1 catch. But yeah, it was a good Sauce game. His first pick since 2022. He had a funny thing in the locker room. I forgot about this until somebody asked him, but Mac Jones, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, Mac Jones like punched him in the nuts during one of the games. And it was like a whole
I didn't
thing.
remember that either.
Yeah. It was like a whole thing that day because I forget the context of what happened, but Mac Jones punched him in the nuts. And so somebody asked him, like, was it a little extra special getting it off Mac Jones? He's like, yes, it was. And I know some of you probably know what that is. I won't bring it up, but I think you guys know why, kind of thing. I mean, Mac Jones was like feeling himself for a bit there. He was running around a lot. He was talking a lot of shit. I think
5-0 in his career entering this game against the Jets.
So
they got the Mac Jones monkey off their back.
They did. Although I will say, and we're going to get into I'll hold this for the coaching section, but yeah, I mean, Mac Jones, I think the defense didn't have a great game still ultimately. Like their pass rush was non-existent. Again, Hassan Reddick, I think he had 8 pressures against the Texans, and he has 10 in all the other games he's played in combined, and a half a sack still. So just a complete non-factor. I didn't really notice Will McDonald as much, and Mac Jones was playing a little too well against the defense that's supposed to be good. So I still think it ultimately wasn't a great game for the defense, but they finally got a stop when it mattered at the end of the game. Like they haven't done that all season. So you take the wins, like we said, not the best win against a bad team, but whatever, take the wins.
All right, 4th down. We're checking in on the coaching, and we're going to have a positive and a negative here. Let's start on the positive side with this offense and what it has become here with Downing doing the play calling. It's for what it's worth, it's heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I think Downing's been really good the last few weeks. I think some of his play designs have been really clever. The late, like 40-something yarder to Devontae to set up the game-winning Breece Hall touchdown run. I think that was a really cool design where Aaron was like going that way. He was evading some pass rush, and then it left like Devontae wide open at the sideline. He threw it to him. He got enough time. I mean, the time is a huge thing, obviously, giving him time. But ultimately, yeah, Downing, this offense is just so much better with him than it was with Hackett. Like they just seem more willing to try things, more willing to take shots, things like that. A lot of it's relying on Rodgers ultimately. And I still think they pass it way too much in the red zone. I think they're close to 75% of the time, which is far and away the highest pass percentage in the red zone in the NFL. They just do not run the ball there, and I don't get it. It worked out ultimately in this game, but I think that's probably more Aaron than Todd Downing. But, again, I keep referring to Vrabel. I'm still like skeptical he ultimately comes to the Jets, but if he were to, he has ties to Downing. There'd be some continuity, and if you're of the mind that you want Rodgers back, then having Downing there wouldn't be the worst thing. That's the positive side. We can talk about the negative side now if you want.
That play was interesting because it's something we talked about earlier in the year when they played the Vikings, was how McConnell does such a good job of getting Justin Jefferson free, despite the fact that like the defenses are focused on this guy. He's still able to like formulate plays that get him open. And that play, somehow Devontae Adams just got lost in the shuffle, right? Yeah. He's wide open on the sideline. And it reminded me of that, of just like, if you design a good enough play, even all pro receivers can find space. All right. The negative is, and this did not end up burning them, I thought the broadcast went a little too far in just like grilling them for this decision, but they get down to the 1-yard line with 1:08 to play. And in theory, they could have kneeled down 3 times, made Jacksonville burn their 2 remaining timeouts, probably run the clock down to about 10 seconds with the field goal, and then give the ball back to Jacksonville with 10 seconds, no timeouts, down 3. Instead, they hand the ball off. Jacksonville allows Breece Hall to score, and they get the ball back then with like 1:05 to play, 2 timeouts, and a chance to go down and tie it. Now, the reason I'm not going to kill them too much on this is because, I don't know, we've seen so many disastrous field goal efforts in the NFL this year that if you can just take a 7-point lead with a minute to play, like as opposed to trying a field goal at any point, I don't know. I'm not killing Ulbrich, but a lot of people are today.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad process ultimately. I think you gave them a lot of time for your defense, which has not stopped anybody. And ultimately they did go up the field. They got to like the 40 or something like that, and then they threw the pick. On the other hand, like I also get it. They really had a hard time scoring points a lot of times this season. They want to get 30. And you just guarantee that you're going up by a touchdown or whatever. And then you just if you can't and I think the idea maybe is that if you can't stop Mac Jones, then what can you stop? What I personally would have done is I maybe would have run one, not on first down. I maybe would have run like a play or two to kill some clock, whether it's kneeling it or whatever it is, or make them burn at least one of the timeouts.
Yeah.
And then run it in. I just wouldn't have done it on first down was my thing. I think that was poor process.
Yep.
And somebody's asked a question about Saleh. There's actually like Ulbrich making these mistakes a lot. It seems like just got me thinking. Like, look, I was as critical of Robert Saleh as anybody, I think, on the speed and in this community. I mean, I do think that he probably should have been fired in the offseason, all that stuff. But I do wonder, like, where are they right now if they don't fire him? Because they very clearly were not prepared for that moment. And I don't fully blame Ulbrich for it. He just was thrown into a job he wasn't ready for. I think that's pretty obvious. But the defense took a huge step back. I think we all underestimated Saleh's involvement with the defense. I think their game management was a lot better when Saleh was the head coach. I mean, they definitely had flaws, but I think their time management, I know it's hard to remember now because we're like in the shit right now with this group. But I do think they were better in these moments with Saleh as the coach generally. And anyway, I just want, like, I don't know that they'd be a playoff team ultimately. I think this defense was clearly going to take a step back. But are they, instead of 4-10, are they, 6-8 or whatever it is, like something like that? Or are they an 8-win team or a 9-win team with Saleh, or were they always going to be bad? Like, it's possible they were, but I just think the circumstances of that firing really just hurt this team more than anything. And I just wonder the what if. I think the ultimate what if is if they had fired Saleh in the offseason and hired Rabel, what is their record? And they might have a winning record, or they might be close to it, or it might have been a rebuild or whatever. But that's like the ultimate what if. But in season, what if Saleh staying through whatever, December? I don't know. I feel like they have at least a couple more wins, or maybe they win a couple of these where they blew it at the end or something like that. Like, I don't think they're 4-10 at the very least.
Well, if you have a couple, if you're 7-7, that's still they wouldn't be mathematically eliminated, right? Like
True.
You could see a world where they actually were still
we'd be talking playoff
going.
scenarios, yeah.
Yeah, although I don't know.
But again, it might have been headed toward disaster this whole time. It felt to that degree a little bit. I mean, that Vikings game was really bad. The Broncos game was awful. Like, they were not good with Saleh, but I don't know. I just wonder. It's one of those things that will be a what if that can't get answered.
Yeah. And the one thing I think about it is I think the defense would be a lot better if Ulbrich was just focused on it throughout the whole season as opposed to what it has become. All right. One more thing on that. Rodgers on that play or on that series said, like, if we were 10-3, we probably would have kneeled on it. But at 3-10, just run it in, which I thought was like almost a way of like kind of being critical, but like, who cares? We're 3-10. Just do whatever.
Yeah. I think I think it's more they just like they've struggled so much in the red zone and stuff. I'm sure there was a part of it that's just like, let's just get the points and hope that the defense can do their job. I don't know.
What we didn't talk about was the fake punt, which I thought was an awesome call.
Also, whenever those are in the first half, it gets lost. Ashton Davis was their leading rusher for most of the game, and then Aaron Rodgers was their leading rusher at the end. But also Ashton Davis, like, trying to hurdle defenders. Oh man, that was ballsy. Although I will say, because we didn't pod at the end of the week, I guess. Kane Nwangwu broke his hand out for the year. Like, that, it was a very brief moment where they got to see him. And then Malachi Corley still inactive, healthy scratch. Like, they just don't even trust him at all. Yeah. But anyway, Ashton Davis, cool moment for him because he hasn't had a great year. But I think he had another play like that last year or the year before too, where he's kind of the guy they use for those. For a moment, it looked like it was going to backfire. Like, that defensive end was there. And he just got past him, and then obviously the whole side of the field opened up. But thumbs up for going for that. You're 3-10. Like, sure, fake punts, do all the fun stuff. Yeah. At least make for an entertaining game. All right. The one negative of the win is that they did drop from 7th to 8th in Tankathon. Patriots move up to 3rd, which you never want to see as a Jets fan. The Giants inside track on the number 1 pick at this point. So the Tankathon is going to be interesting because the
they're now at 4 wins. They're behind a whole bunch of 3-win teams. So the thought of like getting a top 5 pick seems unlikely at this point, that all those teams are going to lose games.
Yeah, it's unlikely. Yeah, I agree.
So at this point, I would just say, like, let's just keep winning games.
Yeah,
if you're the
might
Jets.
as well.
Like, just win games.
Yeah,
like, doesn't matter if you have the 8th pick
Yeah.
or the 12th pick, whatever. Just win some games.
Yep.
All right, that's going to do it for us. We're going to be back later in the week. Not sure exactly when yet. Zach's working on a big story, so hoping to wait on that, but we'll kind of see how that plays out, if that's this week or next week. And we'll get you ready for another game coming up. But thank you so much for everybody that tuned in to the Flight Plan podcast. We appreciate you hanging with us here to round out the end of the season. Bye-bye.